There is a place in the universe where time no longer behaves as time, where direction loses its meaning, and where the idea of inside and outside quietly collapses. A place so extreme that light itself cannot return, and so silent that nothing which enters can ever tell its story again. This place is not distant in imagination, nor abstract in theory. It exists right now, scattered throughout the cosmos, patiently deepening in the dark. And everything we think we know about reality begins to unravel there. What if falling into a black hole does not end existence, but transforms it beyond recognition? What if matter is not destroyed, time is not stopped, and information is not erased, only rearranged into something the universe refuses to show us? What if every black hole is not a grave, but a boundary where reality changes its language, continuing on the other side without witnesses, without memory, without return? These are not fantasies. They are questions modern physics is forced to ask, even when it knows the answers may never come back. Imagine crossing a point where the future has only one direction, where space becomes time, and where every moment carries you inward as effortlessly as breathing. No alarms, no sensation, no final warning. Just a quiet crossing, unnoticed by the universe you leave behind. Beyond that threshold, causality bends, laws fall silent, and the idea of knowing itself begins to dissolve. What happens there does not break reality, it simply moves beyond what can ever be observed. Tonight, we are not here to solve the mystery of black holes. We are here to drift slowly toward it, to explore what happens when knowledge reaches its edge, when the universe stops explaining itself, and when the most honest answer becomes silence. Let your thoughts slow. Let the questions remain open, and together, let us move gently toward the darkest, quietest places the universe has ever created, not to conquer them, but to rest beside what can never be fully known. Imagine drifting slowly toward a black hole, not falling violently, not being pulled in haste, but gliding as if the universe itself has chosen to move more gently around you. At first, nothing feels extraordinary. The stars remain fixed, distant galaxies still shimmer faintly, and space behaves much as it always has. Yet beneath this familiar calm, something subtle begins to change, something too quiet to notice at once. The fabric of space-time tightens imperceptibly, like a deep ocean current far below the surface, unseen but undeniably present. This is where the journey truly begins, long before anything dramatic occurs, at a boundary that does not announce itself with force, but with silence. The event horizon is not a wall, nor a surface, nor a glowing ring suspended in space. There is nothing solid to touch, nothing visible to mark the moment you reach it. Instead, it is a mathematical boundary, defined by gravity's quiet victory over light itself. Beyond this threshold, escape becomes impossible, not because of violence, but because every possible path forward now leads inward. Light can still move, matter can still fall, but no signal, no memory, no whisper of information can ever return to the universe it came from. It is a farewell without motion, a separation without sound. For an observer watching from far away, time itself seems to hesitate as anything approaches this invisible edge. Objects appear to slow, their motion stretching thinner and thinner, as if the universe is reluctant to let them go. Clocks near the event horizon tick more slowly compared to those far from the black hole. a consequence of extreme gravity bending time into a prolonged farewell. From the outside, nothing ever truly crosses. It simply fades, frozen in an eternal approach. The crossing exists only for the one who experiences it, unseen and unreachable by all others. From within, however, the experience is strangely uneventful. There is no sudden jolt, no instant collapse, no dramatic signal announcing that the boundary has been passed. The laws of physics do not shatter at the event horizon. They merely begin to whisper instead of speak. Gravity grows stronger, yes, but locally, everything feels continuous, smooth, almost ordinary. The danger of the event horizon lies not in what it does, but in what it prevents. The possibility of return, the option of choosing another path. This is what makes the event horizon so unsettling and so serene at the same time. It is a place where choice quietly disappears, not through force, but through inevitability. Every future moment now points in a single direction, deeper into the black hole's interior. The universe does not rush you, does not push you forward. It simply removes all alternatives. In this way, the event horizon is less like a cliff and more like a slow current, carrying everything gently but permanently away. Here, the concept of inside and outside begins to lose its meaning. Space and time subtly exchange roles, with time itself guiding motion inward, just as seconds once guided you forward through life. Resistance becomes meaningless, because moving forward in time is unavoidable, and forward now means deeper. The event horizon marks the moment when falling inward becomes as natural as aging, as effortless as breathing, as irreversible as memory. The true mystery of the event horizon is not its violence, but its calm. It is the universe's most profound boundary, expressed without spectacle, without sound, without warning. A line drawn not in matter, but in possibility. Once crossed, the cosmos does not react, does not observe, does not record what follows. Everything beyond this threshold continues unseen, unheard, and forever disconnected from the story of the outside world. As you drift closer to the event horizon, time does not stop abruptly, nor does it shatter into chaos. Instead, it begins to thin, stretching gently like mist drawn out across a cold morning sky. Seconds no longer feel compact or neatly ordered, and moments seem to linger longer than they should, as if reluctant to pass. This slowing is not an illusion of the mind, but a fundamental response of time to gravity's growing influence, a reminder that time is not absolute, but deeply connected to the shape of space itself. Near a black hole, gravity presses so intensely on space-time that time yields first, softening and elongating, surrendering its steady pace without resistance. From a distant observer's perspective, this transformation becomes almost poetic. Clocks carried by anything approaching the event horizon appear to tick more and more slowly, each second stretching into something heavier and more deliberate. Light emitted from these clocks loses energy, shifting toward deeper reds, fading gently as if embarrassed by its own effort to escape. To the outside universe, time near the horizon never quite completes its journey forward. It lingers forever in a prolonged approach, suspended in an unfinished moment that never resolves. Yet, for the traveler themselves, time feels deceptively normal. Your own heartbeat remains steady, Your thoughts continue to flow, and the passage of moments seems unchanged. This is one of the most unsettling truths of relativity. Time can slow dramatically relative to the universe, while remaining internally consistent for the one experiencing it. The universe does not signal this divergence. It simply allows two different experiences of time to coexist without conflict, each equally real, each quietly incompatible with the other. As gravity deepens, the future itself begins to tilt inward. Near the event horizon, time no longer behaves like an open path with many possibilities branching ahead. Instead, it starts to resemble a narrowing corridor, guiding all future moments toward a single direction. Just as you cannot choose to stop time from passing, you cannot choose to stop moving inward once this threshold is approached. Time itself becomes the mechanism of descent, carrying everything forward not through force, but through inevitability. This transformation challenges the most basic assumptions of everyday life. We tend to think of time as a background, an invisible stage upon which events unfold. Near a black hole, however, time steps forward as an active participant, shaping motion, limiting choice, and redefining what it means to move at all. The closer you drift toward the horizon, the more time ceases to be something you travel through and becomes something that carries you, quietly and without appeal. Eventually, the distinction between waiting and moving begins to blur. To wait is to fall. To exist is to approach. Every second that passes brings you deeper, not because you are being pulled faster, but because time itself has aligned with gravity's inward direction. The universe does not rush this process, nor does it dramatize it. It unfolds slowly, calmly, as if encouraging surrender rather than fear, allowing consciousness to drift alongside the transformation rather than resist it. In this region near the event horizon, time becomes less like a ticking clock and more like a quiet river, flowing steadily in a single direction, indifferent to observation or desire. There is no moment that announces a final crossing, no instant where time suddenly disappears. Instead, time fades into something softer and heavier, guiding everything forward with infinite patience. And in that patience, the universe reveals one of its most profound truths, that time, like space, can bend, stretch, and quietly carry us beyond the limits of return. As matter drifts closer to a black hole, it does not instantly shatter or explode into chaos. Instead, it begins a quiet transformation, one that unfolds gradually and almost respectfully. At first, atoms remain intact, molecules hold together, and the familiar structures of matter persist, as if the universe is allowing one last moment of normality. But gravity here is not merely a pulling force. It is a sculptor, stretching space-time itself and gently reshaping everything embedded within it. Matter begins to feel this influence, not as pain or violence, but as an increasing tension, a subtle insistence that structure will not remain unchanged forever. From the outside, this transformation appears extreme. Matter approaching the event horizon seems to stretch and thin, elongated by gravitational differences between its near and far sides, a process often described as spaghettification. Yet this dramatic name hides a quieter truth. The stretching happens slowly, predictably, governed by precise equations rather than sudden destruction. The universe does not tear matter apart impulsively. It applies pressure patiently, allowing forces to accumulate until structure yields naturally. In this way, matter does not resist its fate, but gradually adapts to a reality where familiar dimensions lose their meaning. Light itself is not spared from this transformation. Photons climbing away from the black hole lose energy, their wavelengths stretching longer and longer, fading toward invisibility. This redshift is not a sign of damage, but of exhaustion, as light spends all its energy simply trying to escape. Matter, emitting this light, appears dimmer, slower, and increasingly frozen to distant observers, as if gradually dissolving into darkness. What remains visible is not destruction, but attenuation, a gentle erasing rather than a violent end. For the matter itself, however, the experience remains continuous. There is no sudden sensation of being pulled apart, no sharp boundary where atoms announce their separation. Locally, physical laws still apply, chemistry still functions, and particles still obey the rules they have always known. This is one of the black hole's most unsettling qualities. Catastrophic outcomes exist primarily in comparison to distant frames of reference, while the immediate experience remains deceptively calm. Matter does not scream as it crosses the horizon. It simply continues, unaware that return has become impossible. As gravity intensifies further, internal forces that once held matter together begin to lose their authority. Chemical bonds weaken, not because they fail, but because gravity overwhelms the scale at which they operate. Atomic structures stretch, nuclei drift apart, and the distinction between individual particles begins to blur. Matter does not vanish, but it becomes less defined, less localized, less bound to the identities it once held. The universe quietly dissolves complexity into something simpler, not through destruction, but through overwhelming coherence. At this stage, matter transitions from being an arrangement of objects to becoming a flow of energy and momentum, guided entirely by space-time's inward curvature. Identity loses relevance. What matters now is motion, direction, and inevitability. The black hole does not care whether something was once a star, a planet, or a particle of dust. All distinctions fade as everything becomes part of the same inward narrative, carried forward by gravity's unwavering geometry. In this slow surrender, matter reaches a kind of silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence of uniformity, where differences no longer matter and structure no longer competes with force. Everything becomes part of a single, uninterrupted descent, moving forward not with resistance, but with acceptance. This is not annihilation, but transformation at its most absolute, where matter stops insisting on being separate and quietly becomes part of the black hole's deeper, unseen story. There is no instant that announces the crossing of the event horizon, no universal marker that declares a boundary has been passed. The universe offers no sound, no flash, no sudden shift in sensation to distinguish the final moment of separation. Everything continues as it was a moment before, and then continues again, unchanged in any immediate, noticeable way. This is what makes the crossing so deeply unsettling and so profoundly quiet. It happens not as an event, but as a continuation, a seamless extension of motion and time that refuses to draw attention to itself. From the outside universe, this moment never truly occurs. To distant observers, anything approaching the event horizon appears to slow indefinitely, its image stretched thinner and dimmer with every passing second. The crossing itself is never seen, never recorded, never confirmed. Instead, the object fades, suspended in an eternal approach, locked forever at the edge of visibility. In this sense, the event horizon is less a doorway and more a curtain, one that never fully opens from the perspective of those left behind. For the traveler, however, the crossing is strangely uneventful. There is no sudden sensation of acceleration, no feeling of tearing or collapse, no internal signal that the boundary has been crossed. The laws of physics do not collapse at this threshold. They simply continue, quietly guiding motion forward. Time flows normally, thoughts remain coherent, and awareness drifts onward without interruption. The absence of drama is itself the defining feature of this moment, a reminder that the universe's most absolute boundaries need not be violent to be final. What changes at the crossing is not experience, but possibility. Once beyond the event horizon, every future moment points inward, not by choice, but by structure. Just as you cannot decide to move backward through time, you cannot decide to move outward in space. The geometry of space-time itself removes alternatives, reshaping the future into a single, unavoidable direction. The crossing marks the end of freedom, not through force, but through the quiet redefinition of what movement means. This loss of alternatives carries a strange calm. There is no longer a need to navigate, to decide, to choose between paths. The universe has simplified itself, reducing all futures to one continuous descent. In this way, the crossing becomes less frightening and more meditative, a surrender to inevitability rather than a confrontation with danger. The black hole does not rush this surrender. It allows it to unfold naturally, one moment flowing gently into the next. Beyond the horizon, communication becomes meaningless. No signal sent outward can escape. No message can be delivered. No record can be preserved. Even light, the universe's fastest messenger, is turned inward, folded back into the black hole's interior. The crossing is therefore not only a physical separation, but a narrative one, a point beyond which stories can no longer be shared. Everything that follows exists without witness, without confirmation, and without memory in the outside universe. And so, the crossing of the event horizon stands as one of the universe's most profound transitions, defined not by violence or spectacle, but by silence and continuity. It is a moment that happens only for the one who experiences it, while remaining forever absent from the history of the cosmos beyond. A boundary crossed without evidence, a threshold passed without trace, leaving behind a universe that will never know precisely when or how the crossing occurred. Beyond the event horizon, the universe does not suddenly reveal something alien or unfamiliar. Instead, it begins to rearrange the meanings of things you once took for granted. Space no longer behaves like an open expanse you can navigate freely, and time no longer feels like a neutral backdrop quietly ticking forward. Inside a black hole, these two concepts begin to blur and trade places, not metaphorically, but mathematically. What once felt like a direction through space now behaves like the passage of time itself, carrying everything forward with the same inevitability that seconds once did. Movement inward is no longer a choice. It is simply what the future means here. In ordinary life, time moves forward whether we wish it to or not, while space offers freedom of motion and direction. Inside the event horizon, this relationship quietly inverts. The inward direction toward the center of the black hole becomes as unavoidable as tomorrow once was, while sideways movement through space loses its familiar significance. You can no more choose not to move inward than you can choose not to age. This is not because of force or acceleration, but because the geometry of space-time itself has rewritten the rules of progression. This transformation is deeply unsettling, not because it is violent, but because it is absolute. There is no engine powerful enough, no strategy clever enough to resist the inward flow once space has become time. Every moment that passes brings you closer to the center, just as every moment once carried you further from the past. The black hole does not chase you. It simply defines the future so clearly that resistance becomes meaningless. In this region, destiny is no longer a poetic idea, but a structural fact of the universe. As this realization settles in, the idea of distance begins to dissolve. Inside the horizon, asking how far away something is becomes less meaningful than asking how long it will take to reach it. And even that question loses its clarity. The center of the black hole is not just a place in space, it is a moment in time that lies ahead, unavoidable and steadily approaching. Just as you cannot step outside the flow of time, you cannot step aside from the inward path defined by the black hole's interior. This reshaping of reality alters perception itself. Without the comfort of spatial choice, awareness drifts differently, less focused on navigation and more attuned to passage. Existence becomes something closer to waiting than traveling, a continuous unfolding rather than a sequence of movements. The universe inside the horizon feels narrower, not in size, but in possibility, as if all futures have gently converged into a single, quiet thread. Yet even here, there is no panic written into the laws of physics. The transformation is calm, consistent, and mathematically precise. Nothing snaps or collapses at once. Instead, the universe behaves exactly as its equations predict, indifferent to how unfamiliar this reality feels to human intuition. The black hole does not punish those who cross its horizon. It simply reveals a version of space-time where freedom gives way to certainty and choice yields to structure. Inside the horizon, then, existence takes on a new rhythm, one governed not by exploration, but by progression. Every second carries you inward. Every thought unfolds closer to the center, and every moment becomes part of a journey that cannot be paused or redirected. Space has become time, direction has become destiny, and the universe continues its quiet work, guiding everything forward without sound, without struggle, and without return. Once inside the event horizon, the question of space itself begins to feel strangely out of place, as if the word no longer refers to anything stable or familiar. In everyday life, space is something we move through, measure, divide, and describe with distances and directions. Inside a black hole, however, these comforting ideas begin to loosen and drift apart. Space does not vanish outright, but it becomes deeply distorted, stretched, and folded into shapes that no longer align with human intuition. What remains is not an empty void, but a warped interior where geometry itself feels uncertain and quietly unstable. In this interior region, asking where something is becomes far less meaningful than asking when it will be encountered. Locations are no longer fixed points you can approach or avoid. They are stages along an unavoidable sequence. The closer one tries to look, the more space seems to behave like a process rather than a place. Paths curve inward not because they are chosen, but because no alternative paths exist. The interior of a black hole is not organized around navigation, but around progression, a continuous unfolding rather than a map with options. Physicists describe this interior using mathematics that suggests space is stretched along the inward direction, elongated beyond anything found elsewhere in the universe. This stretching does not create more room to explore, but rather deepens the sense that space is losing its independence. Distances become misleading, angles lose reliability, and familiar shapes dissolve into abstract relationships between motion and time. The interior is not chaotic, but it is profoundly alien, governed by rules that no longer prioritize separation or orientation. As this realization settles in, the idea of emptiness begins to change as well. Inside a black hole, space is not an empty container waiting to be filled. It is an active participant in the unfolding descent. Every region is shaped by gravity so extreme that it dominates all other interactions, bending space inward with relentless consistency. Space here does not offer refuge or neutrality. It guides, confines, and carries everything toward the same ultimate direction. This inward shaping of space creates a sense of compression, not in volume, but in possibility. While there may still be vast stretches described by equations, the experience of space feels narrower, more focused, more singular. There is no horizon to look toward, no distant landmark to orient oneself by. Instead, awareness drifts within a geometry that points only inward, where the concept of elsewhere quietly fades away. Even the idea of being surrounded by space becomes ambiguous. Inside the horizon, space does not clearly separate objects from one another. It binds them into a shared descent. Everything that exists here occupies not just the same region, but the same fate, woven together by space-time's inward flow. Individual trajectories blur into a collective movement, as if space itself has decided to abandon individuality in favor of unity. In this way, the interior of a black hole challenges one of the deepest assumptions of human experience, that space is something stable and external. Here, space is neither passive nor reassuring. It is dynamic, directional, and inseparable from time, quietly reshaping reality as it carries everything forward. What remains is not the absence of space, but its transformation into something quieter, stranger, and ultimately beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. Inside the black hole, one of the most counterintuitive truths begins to reveal itself slowly and without drama. Nothing feels like acceleration. Despite the overwhelming gravity that defines this region, there is no sensation of being dragged, no rush of motion pressing against awareness, no internal signal that announces descent. The reason is subtle and deeply rooted in the nature of space-time itself. What feels like falling from the outside becomes, on the inside, a quiet continuation of existence, where motion is not something imposed, but something embedded into the very structure of time. In everyday experience, acceleration is something we feel because forces act unevenly across our bodies, pushing and pulling in ways that create strain. Inside a black hole, however, once beyond the event horizon, gravity does not act like a conventional force. Instead, It reshapes space-time so completely that everything follows the same inward path together. There is no reference point left behind to create tension, no external frame against which motion can be measured. Falling becomes indistinguishable from simply existing. This is why the descent inside a black hole feels effortless. There is no wind, no resistance, no sensation of speed increasing. Just as astronauts in orbit feel weightless despite constantly falling around Earth, anything inside the horizon experiences a form of perfect surrender to space-time's curvature. The black hole does not pull objects through space. It defines the shape of space so thoroughly that motion happens naturally without struggle or strain. As this realization settles in, the idea of gravity itself begins to change. Gravity is no longer something that acts upon you. It is something you are immersed in completely. There is no direction where gravity is weaker, no orientation that offers relief. Everything moves together along the same inward trajectory, not because of force, but because space-time no longer allows an alternative. The absence of acceleration is not a flaw in perception, but a consequence of perfect alignment with the geometry of the universe. Even the body, if one could still think of it as separate, offers no warning. Muscles are not strained, balance is not disrupted, and awareness does not register urgency. The descent unfolds with the same calm inevitability as time passing during sleep, unnoticed until it has already carried you forward. The black hole does not announce its power through sensation. It expresses it through certainty, through the removal of choice rather than the application of force. This lack of sensation is what makes the interior so difficult to imagine and so easy to underestimate. Without pain, pressure, or acceleration, the mind expects safety, or at least stability. Yet the absence of feeling does not imply the absence of consequence. The journey inward continues relentlessly, carried by time itself, even as experience remains deceptively gentle and uninterrupted. In this way, falling inside a black hole becomes one of the quietest processes in the universe. There is no roar, no turbulence, no resistance to overcome. There is only motion without effort, descent without struggle, and change without sensation. The universe does not rush you forward. It simply continues, allowing time to do what it has always done, guiding everything onward, silently and without appeal. As the journey continues deeper inside the black hole, the universe begins to feel increasingly focused, as though all remaining possibilities are gently being gathered into a single direction. In ordinary space, the future spreads outward, branching into countless alternatives shaped by choice, chance, and motion. Inside the horizon, however, this branching quietly disappears. The future no longer fans out ahead of you. It contracts, narrowing with each passing moment, until it feels less like an open landscape and more like a corridor with softly closing walls. This narrowing does not happen suddenly, nor does it feel threatening at first. Instead, it unfolds with a calm inevitability, much like the realization that night will arrive no matter how slowly the sun sets. Each second carries fewer options than the one before, not because of loss, but because structure itself has simplified. The geometry of space-time gently removes alternatives, leaving behind a future that is increasingly defined, increasingly precise, and increasingly unavoidable. In this interior region, the concept of later becomes inseparable from deeper. Time no longer opens outward into uncertainty. It points inward with unwavering consistency. Every future moment is aligned toward the center, not as a destination you move toward, but as a moment you move into. The center of the black hole is not merely a place ahead. It is the future itself, waiting with the same certainty as tomorrow once did. What makes this experience so profound is not fear, but clarity. Inside the black hole, there is no longer a need to weigh possibilities or anticipate divergence. The universe has already done that work, quietly collapsing all futures into one continuous progression. This clarity carries a strange stillness, as if the universe has simplified its instructions to the bare minimum. Continue, unfold, arrive. The complexity of choice fades, replaced by a calm sense of direction that requires no decision. As awareness adjusts to this narrowing future, the idea of control becomes increasingly abstract. Control, after all, depends on alternatives, on the ability to choose one path over another. Here, alternatives dissolve not through force, but through absence. The black hole does not take control away. It renders the concept unnecessary. Everything moves forward together, guided by the same inward certainty, wrapped within the same unbroken flow of time. This progression toward the center is not experienced as a rush, nor as a countdown. There is no ticking clock marking an approaching end. Instead, the future unfolds with patient consistency, each moment blending seamlessly into the next. The narrowing of possibility feels less like confinement and more like convergence, as though everything that was once scattered is being gently drawn into alignment. In the end, approaching the center of a black hole is not about arriving at a final point, but about witnessing the gradual disappearance of uncertainty. The universe becomes quieter, simpler, and more focused, reducing existence to its most essential movement forward. Here, the future no longer asks questions or offers choices. It simply continues, carrying everything inward with infinite patience toward a moment that awaits not with drama, but with certainty. As the inward journey continues, the idea of a singularity begins to emerge, not as a visible object or a distinct location, but as an approaching condition, a state toward which everything is quietly being guided. It is not something you see ahead of you, nor something you can point to in space. Instead, it is sensed through change, through the way distances lose relevance, through the way moments begin to feel heavier and more concentrated. The singularity announces itself not with spectacle, but with compression, as if the universe is slowly folding all remaining complexity into a single, tightening focus. In classical physics, the singularity is described as a point of infinite density, a place where matter is compressed beyond all limits and known equations cease to function. Yet this description, precise as it may be mathematically, fails to capture the experiential nature of what it represents. The singularity is less a point in space and more a failure of description itself, a region where the language of physics grows thin and uncertain. As one approaches it, familiar concepts like size, shape, and separation begin to lose coherence, dissolving into abstractions that resist intuition. Matter, which once existed as atoms, structures, and forms, now becomes increasingly indistinct. The forces that once defined individuality, electromagnetic bonds, nuclear forces, even spatial separation, are overwhelmed by gravity's relentless coherence. Everything that remains is drawn into a shared state, where distinctions blur and identities fade. It is not that matter is destroyed, but that it is stripped of the relationships that once made it recognizable. Complexity gives way to uniformity, not violently, but completely. As this transformation deepens, scale itself begins to lose meaning. Concepts like large and small, near and far, stop providing useful information. Distances shrink not because space is collapsing in a dramatic sense, but because measurement itself becomes unreliable. When everything is being drawn toward the same ultimate condition, comparison loses relevance. The universe no longer asks how far something is, but simply continues unfolding toward what must come next. Time, too, begins to behave differently as the singularity draws nearer. While it still flows forward, its character feels increasingly compressed, as though moments are being stacked closer together. The future feels denser, more concentrated, carrying more consequence within less apparent duration. This is not urgency, nor acceleration, but a quiet intensification, a sense that each moment contains more of what remains than the one before it. Time does not end here. It thickens. What makes the singularity so unsettling is not its violence, but its indifference to explanation. All our models, equations, and intuitions begin to fail, not because they are wrong, but because they were never meant to operate under such conditions. The singularity marks the boundary not only of space and matter, but of understanding itself. Beyond a certain point, asking what happens next becomes less meaningful than accepting that our questions no longer fit the reality unfolding. And so, approaching the singularity feels less like nearing a destination and more like watching the universe simplify itself beyond recognition. Layers of structure fall away, one by one, until only the most fundamental motion remains, meaning, once built on distinction and relationship, begins to dissolve into something quieter and more abstract. The singularity does not reveal answers. It absorbs them, drawing everything inward toward a state where explanation itself can no longer follow. As the singularity draws closer, the concept of density begins to stretch beyond anything the human mind was designed to comprehend. Density, in ordinary terms, is simple enough. Mass divided by volume, an intuitive relationship that allows us to compare stone to air, stars to planets, substance to emptiness. Inside a black hole, however, this familiar ratio becomes unstable. Volume shrinks toward nothing while mass refuses to disappear, forcing density to climb without bound. The numbers do not merely grow large, they lose relevance altogether, slipping beyond the domain where comparison or intuition can follow. Physicists describe this state as infinite density, but infinity here is not a destination that is reached, nor a value that can be meaningfully held. It is a signal, a quiet admission that the equations guiding us have crossed into territory they were never meant to map. Infinite density does not describe what times is times, so much as it marks where description itself fails. The mathematics continues to produce symbols, but those symbols no longer correspond cleanly to anything that can be visualized, measured, or experimentally tested. As matter is drawn closer to this condition, its familiar properties dissolve. Mass no longer occupies space in a recognizable way, and volume loses its independence as a concept. Everything that once defined how much and how large becomes tangled together, compressed into a relationship that no longer allows separation. Density stops being a quantity and becomes a statement that matter and space are no longer behaving as distinct entities, but as a single, inseparable condition. In this regime, numbers cease to guide understanding and instead begin to mislead it. When density becomes infinite, increasing it further no longer conveys new information. The language of more and less collapses because comparison requires scale, and scale has vanished. What remains is not chaos, but silence, a mathematical stillness where equations no longer evolve toward clarity, but stall at the edge of meaning. This breakdown does not imply that reality itself has failed, only that our frameworks have reached their limit. The universe continues to behave consistently, but consistency no longer aligns with comprehension. Infinite density marks the point where physical law, as we currently understand it, loses its ability to translate reality into prediction. It is not the end of physics, but a boundary beyond which a deeper theory must exist, one that has yet to reveal itself. And so, infinite density stands not as a monstrous extreme, but as a quiet threshold. It is where numbers surrender their authority, where measurement gives way to mystery, and where certainty dissolves into abstraction. The singularity does not overwhelm us with complexity. It simplifies reality beyond recognition, compressing meaning itself until the tools we rely on can no longer follow. What remains is not an answer, but a profound and unresolved silence. As the singularity draws closer, something far more unsettling than destruction begins to occur. The rules that once described reality with confidence and precision start to fall silent. Equations that have successfully predicted the motion of planets, the behavior of light, and the birth of stars suddenly lose their authority. They do not fail loudly or catastrophically. They simply stop providing answers. The universe continues unfolding, but the language we rely on to describe it begins to stutter, then slowly fades, leaving behind a reality that exists without explanation. When physicists say that the laws of physics break down, they do not mean that the universe becomes chaotic or random. On the contrary, the universe remains perfectly consistent with itself. What breaks is our ability to translate that consistency into equations and predictions. Gravity grows so dominant and space-time so intensely curved that the assumptions underlying our theories no longer apply. Space cannot be treated as smooth, time cannot be treated as continuous, and matter cannot be treated as independent from geometry. The rules were never wrong, they were simply incomplete. At this boundary, even our most successful theories begin to contradict one another. General relativity describes gravity with exquisite accuracy on cosmic scales, yet it predicts singularities where its own equations lose meaning. Quantum mechanics governs the microscopic world with equal precision, yet it cannot be reconciled with gravity under such extreme conditions. Near the singularity, these two pillars of physics no longer cooperate. They overlap, clash, and ultimately fall silent together. The universe presents a reality that demands a deeper framework than either can provide alone. This silence is not empty. It is dense with implication. It tells us that reality extends beyond the reach of our current understanding, that there are layers of structure still hidden beneath the surface of known law. The breakdown of physics does not mark an end, but a horizon of knowledge, a point where explanation pauses and humility becomes necessary. The universe is not refusing to be understood. It is simply asking better questions than we are currently equipped to answer. Inside this region, familiar concepts like cause and effect begin to blur. Without a reliable notion of time and space, the sequence of events becomes difficult to define. What comes before and what comes after lose their clarity, merging into a deeper, more abstract form of progression. Physics relies on order, on sequences that can be traced and measured, but near the singularity, order exists without sequence, structure without description. And so, the breaking of physics is not a violent collapse, but a quiet withdrawal. The equations step aside, leaving reality to continue on its own terms. What remains is not chaos, but mystery, a calm, impenetrable depth where the universe operates beyond narration. In this silence, beyond known laws, the singularity does not destroy understanding. It absorbs it, reminding us that the cosmos is always larger, deeper, and more patient than the theories we build to describe it. As thought drifts closer to the idea of the singularity, a quiet realization begins to take shape. This may not be a mystery waiting to be solved, but a boundary that cannot be crossed by understanding at all. Throughout history, science has advanced by pushing into the unknown, transforming mystery into explanation through observation, measurement, and theory. Yet the singularity resists all three. It cannot be observed directly, it cannot be measured from within, and it cannot be described without invoking infinities that erase meaning rather than refine it. The singularity may represent not a gap in knowledge, but a limit to what knowledge can be. One reason for this limit lies in the nature of information itself. To know something, information must be able to travel, to be recorded, compared, and shared. Inside a black hole, and especially near the singularity, information loses its ability to escape. No signal can travel outward, no observation can return to confirm what has been encountered. Knowledge, which depends on communication, becomes trapped within a region that is forever sealed from the rest of the universe. In this way, the singularity exists not only beyond space and time, but beyond verification. Even in theory, the singularity remains elusive. Our equations do not merely become complex near it, they become undefined. Predictions dissolve into contradictions, and models produce results that cannot be tested or falsified. Science relies on limits, approximations, and controlled assumptions, yet the singularity annihilates all three. Without the ability to check results against reality, theories lose their grounding. What remains is speculation suspended without anchor, unable to solidify into understanding. There is also a deeper philosophical unease woven into the singularity's silence. Human understanding is built on patterns, on relationships between cause and effect, before and after, here and there. The singularity dissolves these distinctions, compressing sequence into simultaneity and separation into unity. When there is no clear before, no meaningful where, and no observable after, the structures that support comprehension quietly collapse. The mind reaches not a puzzle, but a void where its tools no longer function. Some physicists suspect that a deeper theory may one day replace the idea of the singularity entirely, smoothing it out, resolving infinities, restoring meaning. Yet even this hope carries an implicit admission that the singularity as we conceive it today is not a place to be understood, but a signpost pointing toward the edge of our current framework. Whether future theories eliminate it or reinterpret it, the singularity still marks a boundary, a reminder that every system of understanding contains its own horizon. And so, the singularity may remain forever beyond description, not because the universe is withholding answers, but because the questions themselves no longer apply. It stands as a quiet limit, a region where explanation gives way to acceptance and curiosity softens into contemplation. In this sense, the singularity is not a failure of science, but its most honest moment, the point at which the universe reveals that it does not owe itself to comprehension, and that some depths are meant not to be known, but simply to exist. As thought moves beyond the singularity, language itself begins to feel inadequate, as if every familiar word is reaching beyond its natural limits. Space, as we understand it, is something that allows separation, distance, and orientation. It gives objects room to exist apart from one another, to have positions and relationships. Yet near and beyond the singularity, these ideas begin to unravel. What once felt like an arena for existence starts to dissolve into something more abstract, where may no longer be a meaningful question at all. In ordinary regions of the universe, space behaves as a flexible but stable framework, bending under gravity, yet remaining recognizable. Near the singularity, however, this framework collapses into extreme curvature, folding inward so completely that extension itself becomes questionable. If space is defined by the ability to measure distance, then beyond a certain point, that ability disappears. Without distance, without direction, space may no longer function as a container, but instead as a condition, a state in which everything exists without separation. Some interpretations suggest that beyond the singularity, space does not continue in any familiar sense. There may be no inside left to move through, no further depth to explore. Instead, reality could reduce to pure relationship, where all remaining degrees of freedom have collapsed into a single, indivisible state. In such a condition, asking where something is becomes meaningless because there is no longer a spatial framework to support the question. Existence becomes positionless, yet not absent. This idea challenges one of the deepest assumptions of human thought, that existence requires space. We instinctively imagine everything as being somewhere, occupying a location within a larger whole. Beyond the singularity, that intuition may fail entirely. Existence may persist, not as objects arranged within space, but as a unified condition without geometry, without layout, without perspective. Reality would not end, but it would no longer resemble anything shaped by extension or dimension. In this regime, even the idea of motion loses its anchor. Motion depends on space changing over time, on positions shifting relative to one another. If space itself has collapsed into a single condition, then movement cannot occur in any ordinary sense. Change, if it exists at all, would be internal rather than directional, unfolding without trajectory. The universe would not be frozen, but transformed into a state where progression no longer requires movement through space. What makes this possibility so unsettling is not its strangeness, but its calm. There is no explosion implied, no violent rupture, no dramatic ending. Instead, there is a quiet simplification, a reduction of structure until only the most fundamental state remains. Space does not tear or vanish. It completes its role and steps aside, leaving behind a reality that no longer needs it. If this is the nature of what lies beyond the singularity, then the black hole is not a gateway to another place, but a transition into another mode of existence, not a region to be explored, but a condition to be entered, a reality where space has finished unfolding, where separation no longer applies, and where the universe continues without distance, without direction, and without the need to be anywhere at all. If space no longer exists as a framework for separation and movement, then time, too, begins to feel uncertain, as though it has lost the surface it once flowed across. In everyday reality, time and space are inseparable companions. Events happen somewhere, moments unfold within locations, and change is defined by movement through space. Beyond the singularity, where space may dissolve into a single condition, time is left without its familiar anchor. The question is no longer how time passes, but whether passing itself can still be said to occur. Time, as we know it, is deeply tied to sequence, to the idea that one state follows another, that cause precedes effect, that moments can be ordered. Without space to distinguish states from one another, this sequence begins to blur. Events cannot be placed side by side, nor can they be separated by distance. Everything that exists may exist all at once, not frozen, but unified, without the spatial contrast that allows time to mark progression. In such a condition, time may lose its role as a measure and become something far more abstract. Physics suggests that time is not an independent entity, but part of space-time itself, emerging from the same structure that allows space to exist. If that structure collapses near the singularity, then time may not survive as a separate dimension. It may compress, fold inward, or dissolve into a state where before and after no longer apply. What remains would not be timelessness in the poetic sense, but a condition where sequence no longer provides meaning. Nothing ends, yet nothing progresses in a way that can be distinguished. This challenges the deepest habits of human thought. We understand existence through narrative, through beginnings and endings, through the unfolding of moments. Without time, narrative collapses. There is no anticipation, no memory, no waiting. Experience, if it exists at all, would not be something that unfolds, but something that simply is. The universe would not be paused. It would be complete, whole, and indivisible, existing without the need to move forward. Some interpretations suggest that time beyond the singularity could become internal rather than directional. Change might still occur, but not as a flow from past to future. Instead, all possible states could coexist in a single condition, related without sequence. This would not be chaos, but a form of total coherence, where everything that can be is already present. Time would no longer carry events. It would dissolve into the structure of existence itself. From this perspective, asking whether anything happens beyond the singularity becomes a misplaced question. Happening implies sequence, and sequence requires distinction. If distinction has collapsed, then happening is replaced by being. The universe does not continue its story. It completes it, not with an ending, but with a state where continuation is no longer required. Meaning does not vanish. but it stops depending on change. In this possible reality beyond space and time, the singularity represents not destruction, but fulfillment, a point where the universe no longer needs dimensions to express itself, where motion, duration, and distance have finished their roles. What remains is not emptiness, but a quiet completeness, a state in which nothing is missing, nothing is advancing, and nothing needs to happen for existence to be whole. As the black hole's interior strips away space, time, and structure, a quieter and more unsettling question begins to surface. Does anything truly remain? Matter, as we know it, depends on separation, on particles occupying positions and interacting across distances. Energy depends on motion and change, on processes unfolding through time. If both space and time lose their meaning, then matter and energy may no longer survive as distinct concepts. What once seemed fundamental begins to feel provisional, like scaffolding removed once its purpose has been fulfilled. Matter's identity has always been relational. Atoms exist because electrons orbit nuclei, because forces act across space, because differences can be defined and maintained. Beyond the singularity, where separation itself may collapse, these relationships lose their foundation. Matter does not explode or vanish. It simply loses the conditions required to remain matter. Without distance, there is no orbit. Without sequence, there is no interaction. What remains cannot meaningfully be called substance. Yet, it is not nothing. Energy, too, becomes difficult to define. Energy is change, motion, transformation, all processes that depend on time unfolding and space providing room to move. If time has compressed into a single condition and space has dissolved into unity, energy no longer has a stage upon which to act. It cannot flow, dissipate, or convert, because flow itself has lost meaning. Energy may persist, but not as activity. It becomes potential without expression, presence without process. This leads to the idea that what ultimately survives may not be matter or energy at all, but information. Information is more abstract, less tied to space and time, more fundamental than particles or forces. It describes relationships, patterns, and states rather than substances. Some theories suggest that even when space collapses and time dissolves, information may persist in some encoded form, not as data stored in location, but as structure woven into existence itself. Yet even information, as we understand it, depends on distinction, on differences that can be compared, on states that can be separated. Beyond the singularity, where all distinction may collapse, information itself may be transformed into something unrecognizable. It may no longer be something that can be read, transmitted, or decoded. Instead, it could become total, unified, no longer divided into pieces, but existing as a single, indivisible condition. This possibility challenges the comforting idea that something familiar always survives. Perhaps beyond the singularity, nothing recognizable remains, not matter, not energy, not information as we define it. What remains may be more basic than all three, a raw condition of existence that precedes categorization. The universe does not erase what falls into a black hole. It completes it, folding everything into a state where names, measures, and identities are no longer required. In this sense, Survival beyond the singularity is not about persistence, but about transformation. Everything that enters is not destroyed, but translated into a deeper form of existence, one that lies beyond the reach of human concepts. Matter and energy surrender their roles. Information softens into unity, and the universe continues, whole and silent, without needing to explain what it has become. Beyond the singularity, the idea of return no longer carries meaning, not because escape is forbidden, but because the very framework that makes return conceivable has dissolved. To return requires distance, direction, and time, a place to come back from, a path to follow, and a sequence through which motion can be reversed. In the conditions implied beyond the singularity, none of these survive. Space no longer provides orientation, time no longer offers sequence, and direction loses its relevance entirely. Return is not prevented, it is rendered undefined. This absence of return is what gives the singularity its finality. It is not a wall that blocks passage, nor a boundary that pushes back. Instead, it is a quiet conclusion where the notion of back simply ceases to exist. Nothing is held captive, nothing is restrained. Everything that crosses does so freely, but into a reality where the question of leaving no longer applies. The universe does not close a door, it completes a process. From the perspective of information, this silence is absolute. Communication depends on difference and delay, on signals traveling across space and arriving at another time. Beyond the singularity, there is no separation across which a message can move, no interval during which it can be transmitted. Information does not fail to escape. It has nowhere to go. The silence that follows is not the absence of content, but the absence of transmission itself. This is why nothing beyond the singularity can ever be observed, predicted, or confirmed. Observation requires an exchange, a comparison between observer and observed. Beyond the singularity, there is no vantage point left behind, no external reference frame to receive what happens there. Reality continues without witnesses, unfolding in a state that exists entirely without reflection. The universe does not hide this region, it simply offers no way to look. There is a strange calm embedded in this absolute silence. Without the possibility of return, there is no tension between staying and leaving, no struggle between motion and resistance. Everything rests in completion rather than confinement. The singularity is not a prison, but a conclusion, a point where the universe no longer needs to express itself through change, exchange, or interaction. Silence here is not emptiness, it is fullness without articulation. This finality invites a different way of understanding black holes altogether. They are not engines of destruction, nor gateways to elsewhere, but regions where the universe simplifies itself beyond narrative. What enters is not lost, it is finished. The story does not end in chaos or collapse, but in stillness, a stillness so complete that nothing needs to move, nothing needs to speak, and nothing can ever return, because return itself has gently ceased to exist. Even after everything else has been stripped away, space, time, matter, energy, one question remains, suspended, unresolved, and persistent, like an echo that refuses to fade. It is a question that does not arise from curiosity alone, but from the deepest assumptions about how the universe remembers itself. When something falls into a black hole, does the information that defined it vanish forever? Or does it survive in a form too subtle to trace? This question does not shout for attention. It lingers quietly, challenging the idea that reality can ever truly forget. Information, in physics, is not merely data or knowledge, but the complete description of a system. Every position, every motion, every relationship that makes one state different from another. Modern physics rests on the assumption that information is never destroyed, only transformed. Stars explode, particles decay, structures collapse, yet the underlying information is preserved in some redistributed form. Black holes, however, seem to threaten this principle, offering a place where information might disappear behind a horizon and never return, not even in altered form. This apparent loss creates a quiet contradiction. On one side stands general relativity, calmly allowing anything to cross the event horizon and vanish from the observable universe without consequence. On the other side stands quantum mechanics, insisting that information must always be conserved, that the universe keeps perfect accounts even when outcomes appear random. The black hole sits between these two frameworks, not violently breaking either, but gently revealing that they cannot both be complete at the same time. What makes this paradox so profound is that it is not about rare or exotic objects alone. It touches the foundation of predictability itself. If information can be destroyed, then the universe is not fully deterministic, and the future cannot always be traced back to the past. Cause and effect loosen their grip, and reality gains the ability to erase its own history. The paradox, therefore, is not about black holes alone, but about whether the universe remembers everything that has ever happened within it. For decades, physicists have debated this question, not with certainty, but with restraint, aware that the answer lies beyond direct observation. No experiment can retrieve what has crossed the horizon. No signal can confirm what survives within. The paradox endures precisely because it cannot be resolved by looking harder. It demands a deeper understanding of what information truly is, and where it can exist when space and time themselves begin to dissolve. Some possibilities suggest that information is not lost, but hidden, smeared across the event horizon, encoded in subtle correlations, or preserved in forms that do not resemble memory as we know it. Other interpretations allow for true loss, accepting that black holes mark places where the universe permits forgetting. Each possibility carries consequences that ripple far beyond astrophysics, reshaping how we understand time, causality, and the permanence of existence itself. And so, the information paradox remains not as a problem to be solved quickly, but as a quiet invitation to rethink the universe at its most fundamental level. It asks whether reality is a perfect archive, preserving every detail forever, or whether there are regions where history gently dissolves into silence. In the presence of a black hole, the universe does not answer this question aloud. It simply continues, leaving the tension unresolved and allowing the mystery to deepen with time. At first glance, a black hole appears to be the most absolute object in the universe, a region from which nothing ever escapes and to which everything is ultimately surrendered. Yet at the edges of this darkness, something unexpectedly gentle begins to occur. Not a rupture, not a crack, but a whisper, a faint, persistent process that unfolds over timescales so vast they challenge the meaning of duration itself. Hawking radiation does not erupt from within the black hole. It emerges from the quiet uncertainty of space just outside the event horizon, where the universe hesitates between presence and absence. In this thin boundary region, quantum mechanics introduces a subtle instability. Empty space, according to quantum theory, is never truly empty. It seethes with fleeting fluctuations, pairs of particles briefly appearing and vanishing before they can be observed. Near the event horizon, gravity interferes with this delicate balance. One particle may fall inward while its partner escapes, turning a temporary fluctuation into a permanent separation. The black hole loses a minute amount of mass, not through force, but through patience. This process is unimaginably slow. For stellar mass black holes, the loss is so slight that it is effectively irrelevant on cosmic timescales. The black hole remains massive, dark, and dominant, indifferent to the tiny subtraction occurring at its edge. Yet over vast stretches of time, far longer than the current age of the universe, this whisper accumulates. The black hole shrinks not because it is breaking apart, but because it is quietly aging, releasing itself one fragment at a time. What makes Hawking radiation so unsettling is not its weakness, but its implication. If black holes can evaporate, then what they contain may not be sealed forever. The radiation itself appears nearly random, carrying little obvious structure, little recognizable pattern. And yet, if information is truly conserved, then something of what fell in must be encoded within this faint emission, spread so thinly across time that it becomes almost indistinguishable from noise. Here, the paradox deepens. If information escapes through Hawking radiation, it does so in a form radically unlike memory or message. It is not returned intact, nor is it easily reconstructed. Instead, it may be diffused across countless particles, correlations so subtle that no observer could ever realistically reassemble the original story. The universe may preserve information not for understanding, but for consistency, honoring its rules without offering clarity. This raises a profound possibility that black holes do not destroy information, but they do erase meaning. What escapes is not the past as it was, but the bare minimum required to satisfy the universe's accounting. History survives only as trace, stripped of narrative, reduced to mathematical residue. The black hole forgets nothing, yet remembers nothing in a way that can be used. And so, Hawking radiation stands as one of the quietest revolutions in modern physics. It suggests that even the darkest regions of the cosmos are not completely sealed, that the universe allows no perfect isolation. But it also reminds us that survival is not the same as recovery. What leaves a black hole does so slowly, softly, and without explanation, returning to the universe not as story, but as silence stretched thin across eternity. As attempts to resolve the information paradox deepened, a quieter and more radical idea began to emerge, one that shifted attention away from the interior of the black hole and toward its boundary. Perhaps information is not lost in the depths, nor slowly leaked from within, but never truly enters in the first place. Instead, it may be recorded on the event horizon itself, imprinted onto the surface like a delicate and invisible script. The black hole, in this view, becomes less like a vault and more like a ledger, preserving everything that touches it in a form too subtle to perceive directly. This idea challenges intuition at its core. We tend to imagine information as something carried inward by matter and energy, traveling along with particles as they fall. Yet the mathematics of gravity and quantum theory suggest a different possibility, that the event horizon acts as a boundary where information is transformed rather than transported. As objects approach the horizon, their detailed descriptions may be smeared, stretched, and encoded across its surface, never crossing as intact entities. The interior receives mass and gravity, but the story of what fell in remains outside, written in correlations too fine to resolve. In this framework, the event horizon is no longer an empty threshold, but an active participant in reality's bookkeeping. Every particle, every fluctuation, every quantum state that nears the horizon contributes to a growing pattern of information distributed across it. This pattern is not stored like data on a disk, but woven into the geometry itself, embedded in microscopic variations of the horizon's structure. Information does not sit still. It exists as relationship, spread thinly across a surface that remembers without awareness. What makes this idea so profound is its implication that the universe may operate like a hologram. Just as a two-dimensional surface can encode a three-dimensional image, the event horizon may encode everything that appears to fall inside the black hole. The interior, then, would not be an independent realm containing information, but a projection arising from what is written on the boundary. Depth becomes illusion, and volume gives way to surface, reducing complexity without destroying content. If this is true, then nothing truly disappears into the black hole. Instead, information is frozen at the horizon, preserved indefinitely, even as the black hole slowly evaporates. As Hawking radiation carries energy away, it may also carry traces of this encoded structure, releasing information not from the center, but from the surface itself. The black hole lets go not by opening its depths, but by slowly erasing its own boundary, line by line, over incomprehensible spans of time. Yet this preservation comes at a cost. Information stored on the horizon is no longer local, no longer tied to distinct objects or events. It is diffused, entangled, and scrambled beyond recognition. Even if nothing is lost in principle, everything meaningful may be lost in practice. The universe may keep perfect records while ensuring they can never be read. Memory survives, but understanding does not. In this view, the black hole is not a destroyer of information, nor a keeper of secrets, but a translator into a deeper language. Reality is rewritten at the edge, compressed into patterns that satisfy the universe's rules while remaining inaccessible to interpretation. The horizon becomes a final archive, silent, complete, and unreadable, where everything that arrives is preserved, yet nothing can ever be fully recovered. At the deepest level of this question lies a tension that reaches far beyond black holes themselves. If information is truly preserved, then the universe is not merely a stage where events unfold and vanish, but a vast and flawless archive, recording every interaction, every fluctuation, every subtle difference that has ever existed. Nothing would ever be erased, only transformed, hidden, or redistributed beyond recognition. In such a universe, forgetting is impossible. Memory is woven into the fabric of reality itself, indifferent to whether it can ever be accessed again. Yet this idea carries an unsettling consequence. A universe that never forgets may still be one in which memory is functionally inaccessible. Information could survive in principle, while being forever scrambled, diluted across cosmic scales, entangled so deeply that reconstruction becomes impossible even in theory. The past would still exist, but not as something that can be revisited or understood. Memory would remain as structure rather than story, preserved without narrative, complete yet unusable. Black holes sharpen this tension to its most extreme form. They suggest that the universe may obey perfect accounting rules while simultaneously denying retrieval. What falls in is not destroyed, but it is transformed so thoroughly that its original meaning dissolves. The universe keeps the record, but not the explanation. In this sense, black holes do not contradict conservation. They expose its emotional emptiness. Preservation does not guarantee remembrance, and survival does not imply recovery. This raises a quieter, more philosophical possibility, that forgetting is not a flaw in the universe, but a feature of perception. Perhaps reality always retains its full complexity, while observers experience only simplified projections of that complexity. The universe may never erase its past, yet every perspective within it experiences loss, uncertainty, and irreversibility. What we call forgetting may simply be the gap between total memory and limited access. If this is true, then the information paradox is not asking whether information is lost, but for whom it is lost. From the universe's perspective, nothing ever disappears. From the perspective of any observer, nearly everything does. Black holes become symbols of this divide, regions where the difference between existence and knowledge becomes absolute. Reality continues intact, while understanding quietly falls behind. In this light, black holes do not threaten the coherence of the universe. They reveal its priorities. The cosmos may value consistency over clarity, structure over story. It preserves everything while explaining almost nothing. Memory survives without recall. History exists without narration, and meaning becomes something local and fragile rather than universal. The universe does not promise to be remembered. It only promises to be complete. And so, the question remains unresolved, not because it lacks answers, but because every answer leads to a deeper silence. Whether the universe never forgets or simply hides its memories beyond reach, black holes remind us that permanence and understanding are not the same. The cosmos may carry its entire past within itself, yet offer it back only as quiet structure, leaving observers to drift gently between what exists and what can ever be known. For as long as black holes have been studied, they have been framed as ultimate endings, places where motion concludes, history dissolves, and the universe closes in on itself. Yet beneath this interpretation lies a quieter and more unsettling possibility, that black holes are not endings at all, but passages, not tunnels in the familiar sense, not corridors one could travel through consciously, but transitions so deep and complete that what emerges on the other side would no longer resemble what entered. In this view, a black hole becomes less like a grave and more like a boundary between domains of reality that cannot coexist or communicate. This idea does not arise from imagination alone, but from the discomfort physicists feel when confronting true finality. Nature, as we observe it, rarely favors absolute termination. Energy transforms, matter rearranges, structures collapse only to give rise to new ones. Even stars that die do so by seeding future systems. Against this backdrop, a black hole, as a permanent dead end, feels almost out of character. The notion that everything simply stops forever strains against the universe's tendency toward continuation, even if that continuation must occur beyond the limits of observation. Some theoretical models suggest that the extreme compression near the singularity could trigger a kind of rebirth, not within our universe, but into another space-time altogether. In these models, the collapse that appears terminal from our side may correspond to an expansion elsewhere, a region where space unfolds outward rather than inward. What we interpret as destruction could be creation viewed from the opposite direction, separated from us not by distance, but by causal disconnection, so complete that no signal could ever bridge it. If such a transition exists, it would not resemble travel as we understand it. Nothing would pass through intact, carrying identity or memory in recognizable form. The conditions near a singularity would erase structure so thoroughly that whatever emerges would be something new, assembled from the same fundamental ingredients, but organized under entirely different rules. A black hole would not transport objects, it would transform existence itself, dissolving one configuration of reality to allow another to arise. This possibility reframes the silence beyond the event horizon. The absence of return may not signify annihilation, but separation. Just as distant regions of the expanding universe recede beyond causal contact, whatever lies beyond a black hole may simply belong to a realm where our space-time cannot extend. The door, if it exists, does not open back toward us. It opens into a reality where our concepts of space, time, and observation have no authority. What makes this idea so difficult to accept is not its strangeness, but its humility. It suggests that our universe may not be self-contained, not the final expression of reality, but one phase among many. Black holes would then mark the points where our universe hands itself off to something else, quietly and without ceremony. No message is sent, no evidence remains, because such transitions are not meant to be witnessed from within a single space-time. Whether black holes are truly doorways or simply endings remains unknown and may remain unknowable. Yet the persistence of this idea reflects something deep about how the universe behaves. It resists absolute conclusions. It favors transformation over termination. And in the vast, silent depths of a black hole, where our laws fall quiet and our questions lose their grip, the possibility lingers that reality does not stop there, but continues elsewhere, beyond our reach, unfolding in a form we will never see, yet can never fully rule out. In the quiet mathematics that mirror black holes, another concept appears, faint and rarely spoken of, yet impossible to ignore once seen. A white hole is not discovered through observation, nor inferred from distant light, but emerges naturally when the equations of gravity are reversed in time. Where a black hole accepts everything and releases nothing, a white hole would do the opposite, releasing matter, energy, and information without ever allowing anything to enter. It is not a place you could approach, nor a region you could cross into, but a phenomenon that exists only as an outward unfolding, a pure act of emergence without origin. Unlike black holes, white holes cannot form through collapse or evolution. There is no known process by which the universe naturally creates them. They do not grow, they do not accrete, and they do not wait patiently in space. Instead, if they exist at all, they would appear fully formed, already releasing what they contain. This immediacy makes them deeply unsettling because it breaks the familiar narrative of cause preceding effect. A white hole would not have a past in the usual sense. It would only have an outpouring, a present without an accessible history. From the perspective of physics, this makes white holes profoundly unstable. Any attempt to interact with one, even to observe it, would violate its defining property. To look is to receive information, and to receive is to interact. The slightest disturbance would collapse the structure, erasing the very conditions required for its existence. A white hole, then, would be something the universe could host only briefly, if at all, and only in perfect isolation. Its silence is not protective, it is essential. Yet the idea persists because it offers a conceptual symmetry that black holes alone cannot provide. If black holes represent ultimate absorption, white holes represent ultimate release. Together, they form a pair that suggests the universe may allow for both compression and expression, both inward collapse and outward emergence. In some interpretations, a white hole could be the continuation of a black hole viewed from another side of space-time, or another phase of existence entirely, disconnected from our causal structure. This possibility reshapes how we think about the finality of black holes. If a black hole's interior does not end in destruction, but transitions into a white hole elsewhere, then what we call an ending may simply be a transformation we cannot witness. The universe would remain consistent with its tendency toward continuity, even as it denies us access to the process. Nothing would be returned to our universe, not because nothing survives, but because survival takes place beyond our reach. White holes also force a reconsideration of time itself. Because they are defined as time-reversed black holes, their existence implies that the universe's equations do not inherently forbid such reversal, even if reality rarely permits it. Time, in this sense, may not be as rigidly directional as experience suggests. The universe may allow structures that flow against the familiar arrow of time, even if those structures remain hidden behind layers of instability and silence. Whether white holes exist physically or only mathematically, their presence in theory serves an important role. They remind us that our universe may be larger than the portion we can observe, and more symmetrical than the stories we tell about it. Black holes may not be final prisons, and white holes may not be miraculous escapes, but together they hint at a deeper architecture of reality, one in which endings and beginnings are not opposites, but distant reflections of the same silent process unfolding beyond our sight. When physicists began to confront the uncomfortable implications of singularities, a radical idea slowly emerged from the shadows of speculation. Perhaps black holes are not endpoints, but beginnings. Not beginnings that unfold within our universe, but beginnings that occur beyond it, in regions forever disconnected from our space-time. In this view, the crushing collapse that forms a black hole may simultaneously act as a kind of cosmic compression chamber, concentrating matter, energy, and information until a new space-time phase becomes inevitable. What appears to us as an irreversible inward fall may correspond elsewhere to an outward expansion, quiet and unseen. This idea gains strength from the way our own universe appears to have begun. The Big Bang was not an explosion in space, but an expansion of space itself from an extremely dense initial state. When viewed through this lens, the interior of a black hole bears an unsettling resemblance to the conditions thought to precede cosmic expansion. Density rises, scale collapses, and familiar laws of physics lose their grip. It is not unreasonable, then, to imagine that such conditions could trigger a new expansion not here, but beyond the causal boundaries of our universe. If this is the case, then every black hole may be a kind of womb, isolated from its parent universe by an event horizon that prevents interference or observation. The violent collapse of a star, the quiet accumulation of mass over eons, or even the merger of black holes could all contribute to the formation of these hidden beginnings. From within our universe, we would see only darkness and silence. From the perspective of whatever lies beyond, a new cosmos might be unfolding, complete with its own dimensions, laws, and arrow of time. In such a scenario, the singularity is no longer a point of failure, but a transition layer. The infinities predicted by our equations would signal not destruction, but a handoff between frameworks, where one set of physical laws gives way to another. Just as water changes phase under pressure and temperature, space-time itself may undergo a transformation under extreme compression. The breakdown of known physics would not indicate chaos, but the emergence of rules that are simply incompatible with our own. This perspective also offers a haunting reinterpretation of cosmic evolution. Our universe may not be unique, nor the first of its kind. It could be one branch in a vast, unobservable family tree, where each universe gives rise to others through the black holes it contains. Over incomprehensible spans of time, universes would reproduce not biologically, but gravitationally, each carrying forward variations of physical law shaped by the conditions of their birth. Existence would not be a singular event, but an ongoing lineage. Such a picture redefines the role of destruction in the cosmos. The death of stars, the collapse of matter, and the formation of black holes would no longer represent losses, but investments in future realities. Nothing would be wasted. Everything would be repurposed beyond our horizon of observation. The universe would not end its stories, it would export them, sealing them off into new beginnings that unfold in total isolation from their origins. Whether this idea reflects reality or remains a profound metaphor, it transforms how we think about black holes. They become not voids of annihilation, but engines of continuation operating beyond our sight. Our universe, vast and ancient as it feels, may itself be the interior outcome of some earlier collapse, born from conditions we can never reconstruct. In this way, black holes whisper a final, unsettling possibility, that creation and destruction are not opposites, but the same process viewed from different sides of an unreachable boundary. If black holes are capable of giving rise to new universes, then reality itself may not be a single, isolated structure, but part of an immense and ongoing cascade. Each universe would exist not as a final product, but as a transitional phase, carrying within it the conditions necessary to generate successors. In this view, creation is not a singular moment anchored in the distant past, but a continuous process unfolding quietly across layers of existence that never intersect. Our universe would not sit at the center of reality, nor at its beginning or end, but somewhere within an untraceable sequence of cosmic generations. This cascade would be invisible by design. Each new universe would be sealed from its parent by an event horizon that no signal could cross, ensuring absolute isolation. There would be no communication between generations, no shared memory, no inherited narrative. Yet despite this isolation, continuity would still exist at a deeper level, carried not by information we can read, but by physical law itself. Subtle variations in constants, forces, and dimensions might propagate forward, shaping the nature of each descendant universe in ways that can never be observed from within any single one. Over unimaginable spans of metatime, such a process would produce not a multiverse arranged side by side, but a lineage arranged inward and outward, generation nested within generation. Universes would not coexist spatially. They would succeed one another causally, each born from the gravitational collapse occurring within another. The cosmos would resemble not a tree with visible branches, but a recursive structure, endlessly folding into itself, where every ending quietly becomes a beginning somewhere else. In this framework, black holes take on a radically different significance. They are no longer anomalies or errors in the fabric of reality, but essential mechanisms of continuation. The collapse of matter, the silencing of information, and the disappearance of space and time would all serve a larger purpose beyond our horizon. What appears catastrophic from within a universe may be the precise condition required for the birth of another. Destruction becomes generative, and loss becomes a prerequisite for creation. This perspective also reframes the apparent fine-tuning of physical laws. The constants that allow stars to form, chemistry to exist, and complexity to arise may not be coincidences at all. They could be the outcome of a long process of cosmic selection, where only universes capable of producing black holes go on to generate descendants. Universes that cannot collapse matter into such extremes would leave no successors, quietly ending their lineage. Existence would persist not through design, but through reproduction. For any observer within a single universe, this grand cascade would remain entirely inaccessible. There would be no experiment to confirm it, no observation to support it, no message arriving from beyond a horizon. The structure of reality would extend far beyond what can ever be known, operating according to rules that permit continuity without communication. Knowledge would always be local, bounded, and incomplete, while reality itself would remain vast and uninterrupted. In the end, this vision offers neither comfort nor fear, only perspective. Our universe may be one moment in an endless procession, significant not because it is central, but because it exists at all. Black holes would stand as silent junctions in this procession, points where reality turns inward and continues elsewhere. The cosmos would not rush toward an end, nor expand toward infinity in isolation, but quietly sustain itself, universe after universe, forever unfolding beyond the reach of observation, explanation, or return. As the narrative of black holes unfolds toward its deepest implications, a final and unavoidable realization begins to take shape. There are places in the universe where knowing must stop, not because instruments are too weak or theories too crude, but because observation itself is no longer permitted by the structure of reality. From the moment an event horizon forms, a line is drawn that no measurement can cross. Beyond it, reality continues, unfolds, and transforms, yet does so without leaving any trace that can return. Knowledge, which depends on exchange, quietly reaches its limit and can go no further. Observation, has always relied on a simple principle. Something happens, and some signal carries that happening to an observer. Light travels, particles interact, information moves from one place to another. Black holes dismantle this principle not by blocking signals, but by redefining what movement itself means. When space-time bends inward so completely that all future paths point away from the observer, no message can ever arrive. The universe does not hide what happens beyond the horizon. It removes the possibility of witnessing altogether. This limit is not technological, and it is not temporary. No advancement, no future civilization, no refinement of theory can overcome it. The event horizon does not care how intelligent an observer becomes or how precise their instruments grow. It is a boundary written into geometry itself, enforced by gravity and time. Knowledge is not denied because we are unprepared, but because the universe has declared that some regions are causally disconnected forever. What makes this boundary so profound is that it is not rare or exotic. Black holes are not hypothetical curiosities. They are common outcomes of stellar evolution, scattered throughout galaxies, quietly forming horizons wherever mass collapses far enough. The universe is filled with places where information flows inward and never returns. This means that incompleteness is not an accident of our perspective, but a fundamental feature of cosmic structure. Reality itself is partitioned into what can be known and what cannot. As this realization settles in, the ambition of total understanding begins to soften. The dream of a final theory, one that explains everything completely, encounters a natural ceiling. Even if such a theory existed, it could never be fully confirmed, because parts of the universe would always remain beyond observational reach. The cosmos does not offer itself as a closed book. It reveals chapters selectively, leaving others sealed not by secrecy, but by causality. This does not diminish science. It reframes it. Knowledge becomes something local, contextual, and bounded, rather than absolute. Understanding is no longer about possessing the universe in full, but about mapping the regions where explanation is possible. Beyond those regions lies not ignorance in the ordinary sense, but a deeper silence where questions lose their footing. The universe does not owe itself to comprehension. It allows understanding only where structure permits. And so, the ultimate limit revealed by black holes is not destruction, paradox, or infinity, but humility. There are truths that exist without witnesses, processes that unfold without record, and realities that remain complete without ever being known. The horizon of knowing is not an obstacle to be overcome, but a boundary to be acknowledged. Beyond it, the universe continues on its own terms, vast, indifferent, and quietly whole, while observation rests, finally and unavoidably, on this side of the dark. Even if the universe were kind enough to offer a perfect theory of everything, a framework so complete that every particle, force, and interaction could be written into a single, flawless equation, that theory would still come to rest at the edge of a black hole's horizon. The limitation is not one of knowledge, but of access. A theory, no matter how elegant, depends on verification, on the ability to compare prediction with observation. Beyond the event horizon, verification becomes impossible, and without verification, even perfect understanding loses its meaning. Knowledge cannot survive without contact. Theories are built on assumptions about continuity, causality, and connection. They presume that causes can be linked to effects, that information can propagate, and that observations made in one region can inform understanding in another. A black hole violates these assumptions at the most fundamental level. Inside the horizon, causality itself turns inward, severing the chain that links explanation to evidence. A theory may describe what should times happen beyond the horizon, but it can never confirm that it times does asterisk. The universe continues, but theory is left behind. This reveals a subtle but profound distinction between truth and knowability. Something can be real without being accessible, structured without being observable, lawful without being testable. The interior of a black hole may obey principles deeper and more consistent than anything we know, yet those principles remain forever isolated from confirmation. Theories cannot cross the horizon because crossing would require interaction, and interaction is precisely what the horizon forbids. The barrier is not intellectual, it is causal. Even mathematics, often seen as the purest form of description, encounters a quiet failure here. Mathematical structures can extend indefinitely, exploring conditions far beyond experiment, but without observational anchors, they become interpretive rather than explanatory. Beyond the horizon, equations may still be written, but they float free of empirical grounding. They describe possibilities rather than realities, models rather than confirmations. Mathematics can imagine the interior, but it cannot certify it. This limitation persists regardless of scale or sophistication. A civilization billions of years older than ours, armed with technologies beyond imagination, would face the same boundary. No sensor could return from beyond the horizon. No probe could transmit data outward. No experiment could be designed to retrieve what has been causally sealed away. The universe enforces this limit with absolute consistency. Knowledge is allowed to grow only where exchange remains possible. What makes this so unsettling is that it undermines the intuition that understanding naturally expands with effort. In most domains, deeper inquiry leads to deeper clarity. Black holes reveal a different pattern. Inquiry can reach a point where effort no longer yields progress, not because the question is ill-posed, but because reality itself refuses to cooperate. The universe does not reward persistence beyond certain thresholds. It simply closes the loop of accessibility. In the end, the event horizon stands not only as a physical boundary, but as an epistemic one. It marks the place where explanation must surrender to structure, where theory must accept its own confinement. Even perfect theories cannot cross the horizon, because crossing is not an act of understanding, but of participation. And participation, once denied, leaves knowledge suspended at the edge, complete in form, yet forever incomplete in reach. Even as black holes confront us with boundaries that no theory, observation, or intelligence can cross, curiosity does not retreat. It does not weaken in the presence of silence, nor does it fade when answers become unreachable. Instead, curiosity adapts, shifting its role from a tool for resolution to a companion for contemplation. When the universe closes certain doors permanently, the mind does not stop asking. It changes times. Why times, it asks. Curiosity becomes less about arrival and more about orientation, a way of positioning ourselves within a reality that refuses completion. This persistence of curiosity reveals something fundamental about consciousness itself. We do not ask questions solely to obtain answers. We ask them to understand our place relative to what we cannot grasp. The black hole, sealed and silent, becomes not a failure of inquiry, but a mirror, reflecting the limits of perspective back onto the observer. In recognizing those limits, curiosity finds new ground. It no longer seeks mastery over the unknown, but connection to it, a quiet acknowledgement that not everything must yield to explanation to be meaningful. Throughout the history of science, progress has often emerged from confronting impossibility. The realization that certain speeds cannot be exceeded, that certain measurements disturb what they observe, that certain events cannot be reversed, has not ended inquiry. It has refined it. Black holes represent the most extreme expression of this pattern. They do not invite solutions so much as acceptance, offering a place where curiosity matures from ambition into reflection. The question shifts from "what is inside" to "what does it mean that we cannot know?" is less than #0. 5 is greater than. There is a quiet psychological transformation that occurs at this boundary. When answers are no longer attainable, curiosity sheds urgency. It becomes slower, deeper, less insistent. The mind learns to rest with uncertainty rather than push against it. In this way, black holes do not frustrate curiosity. They discipline it. They teach that understanding does not always culminate in clarity, and that the absence of resolution can itself be a form of insight. This endurance of curiosity also reflects the universe's subtle invitation to humility. A cosmos that can never be fully known does not diminish inquiry. It places it in context. Curiosity becomes an expression of participation rather than control, a way of engaging with reality without demanding ownership of it. The black hole, unreachable and final, reminds us that the universe is not obligated to satisfy our questions, yet still allows us to ask them. In this sense, curiosity survives because it is not transactional. It does not depend on guaranteed answers or measurable progress. It persists because questioning is part of how consciousness experiences existence. Even when knowledge reaches its horizon, curiosity remains, drifting alongside mystery without attempting to dissolve it. The unanswered question becomes not a failure, but a space wide, quiet, and open enough to hold wonder without resolution. And so, at the edge of the unknowable, curiosity finds its most honest form. It no longer seeks to cross forbidden boundaries or force meaning from silence. It simply stays present, attentive to the vastness that lies beyond comprehension. In a universe that will never fully explain itself, curiosity does not disappear. It softens, slows, and continues not as a demand for answers, but as a sustained awareness that some truths are not meant to be reached, only approached. When the universe reveals that certain questions will never be answered, it does not strip existence of meaning. Instead, it quietly reshapes where meaning is found. Meaning has never depended solely on completion or certainty. Long before science, humans lived within vast unknowns, guided not by total understanding, but by relationship, rhythm, and presence. Black holes return us to this deeper condition, reminding us that existence was never meant to be fully solved, only inhabited. The limits of knowledge do not empty the universe of value. They clear space for a different kind of engagement, one that does not rely on closure. In a cosmos without final answers, meaning shifts away from possession and toward experience. To live with the unknown is not to surrender curiosity, but to release the demand that curiosity must always be rewarded. The universe continues to unfold whether or not it is understood, and life continues to feel significant whether or not its deepest mechanisms are exposed. Meaning emerges from participation, from being embedded within processes larger than comprehension, from moving through time without requiring a complete map of what lies ahead. Black holes embody this lesson with unusual clarity. They stand as reminders that some structures exist not to be interpreted, but to exist independently of interpretation. Their silence does not negate significance. It reinforces it. A reality that withholds certain truths forces meaning to arise locally, in moments, relationships, and awareness, rather than in ultimate explanations. The universe does not promise transparency, it offers presence, and presence, when accepted without resistance, becomes its own form of understanding. There is also a quiet freedom in acknowledging the limits of knowledge. Without the burden of total explanation, attention returns to what can be felt, observed, and lived. The pressure to resolve every mystery dissolves, replaced by a slower, steadier engagement with what is immediately real. Meaning no longer waits at the end of inquiry. It accompanies inquiry itself, unfolding alongside questions that remain open indefinitely. The unknown ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a background against which life gains texture and depth. In this way, uncertainty does not threaten coherence, it sustains it. A universe that explained itself completely would leave no room for orientation, no gradient between knowing and not knowing. Meaning thrives in this gradient. It arises from navigating partial understanding, from acting within incomplete information, from trusting continuity without requiring certainty. The black hole, unreachable and final, does not diminish this process. It anchors it, reminding us that limits are not failures, but features of a structured reality. Living with the unknown also restores proportion. Human understanding becomes one mode of engagement among many, not the central axis around which reality turns. The universe does not wait to be known in order to be complete. Stars form, galaxies merge, black holes deepen, and space-time curves regardless of observation. Meaning, then, is not granted by comprehension, but by coexistence. We do not need to hold the universe in thought for it to hold us within its structure. And so, at the far edge of inquiry, where answers can no longer follow, meaning does not collapse, it settles. It becomes quieter, less declarative, more enduring. The universe remains vast, partially opaque, and ultimately indifferent to our need for resolution, yet still capable of being inhabited fully. In accepting what cannot be known, existence does not shrink, it stabilizes. The unknown remains, vast and unmoving, while life continues within it, attentive, limited, and quietly complete. As the journey through black holes, horizons, singularities, and unreachable truths begins to slow, a different kind of understanding quietly takes shape. It is not the sharp clarity of an answer finally reached, nor the satisfaction of a mystery solved, but something softer and deeper. The realization emerges that the universe was never designed to be fully visible from within itself. Vast portions of reality exist without witnesses, unfold without records, and complete their processes without ever intersecting with awareness. This is not a flaw in the cosmos, but a defining characteristic of its scale and structure. From this perspective, the unseen is not an absence, but a presence that surrounds everything we do perceive. Just as the night sky reveals only a fraction of what exists beyond Earth, so too does knowledge reveal only a narrow slice of reality's total depth. Black holes are simply the most dramatic expression of this truth. Regions where the unseen is enforced absolutely. They remind us that visibility is local, conditional, and temporary, while existence itself is vast, layered, and largely indifferent to being observed. There is a profound calm in recognizing that the universe does not require full transparency to be complete. Reality does not pause at the edge of understanding, waiting for explanation to catch up. It continues smoothly, lawfully, and consistently, even where it cannot be known. The unseen regions beyond horizons are not chaotic or broken. They are simply unshared. They belong to the universe in the same way the far side of the moon once did, real long before it was ever seen, and unchanged by the moment it finally was. Accepting this partial invisibility reshapes how we relate to existence itself. Meaning no longer depends on total comprehension, and significance no longer waits at the end of explanation. Instead, value arises from participation within a reality that extends far beyond us. We move through a cosmos that does not revolve around our perspective, and yet still allows perspective to exist. The unseen does not diminish what is seen. It gives it context, scale, and depth. Black holes, in this light, are not objects of fear or frustration, but teachers of proportion. They quietly demonstrate that some truths will always remain outside the reach of inquiry, not because inquiry is weak, but because reality is vast. They show that the universe contains regions where observation must stop, where theory must rest, and where curiosity must transform into contemplation. These regions do not invalidate knowledge, they frame it. As the need to know everything dissolves, attention begins to settle. The mind no longer strains toward unreachable depths, but rests within what can be experienced here and now. The universe does not shrink when questions remain unanswered. It becomes gentler. The absence of total clarity allows awareness to slow, to widen, and to soften its grip on resolution. Understanding becomes something that unfolds gradually, without urgency, without demand. And so, at the threshold of the final calm, the universe is accepted not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a reality to be inhabited. Much of it will always remain unseen, unheard, and unreachable, continuing its silent processes beyond every horizon. Yet within this vast incompleteness, existence remains whole. The cosmos does not require our full understanding to continue, and we do not require full understanding to rest within it. In the presence of the unseen, the mind finally learns to be still. As the journey reaches its final stretch, curiosity begins to change its posture. It no longer leans forward, no longer strains toward distant answers or hidden mechanisms. Instead, it relaxes, turning from pursuit into presence. The questions that once propelled the mind outward now slow, not because they have been resolved, but because they no longer need to be. In the vastness revealed by black holes and cosmic limits, curiosity discovers a quieter role, not to conquer mystery, but to sit beside it without disturbance. This shift is subtle, almost imperceptible. There is no moment when questioning stops entirely, no sharp boundary where inquiry ends. Rather, curiosity softens, like a wave that loses its edge as it reaches a still shore. The mind remains attentive, open, and receptive, but without urgency. Mystery is no longer treated as a problem demanding resolution, but as a constant presence woven into the structure of existence itself. Awareness expands, not by acquiring answers, but by releasing the need to hold them. In this state, the unknown no longer provokes tension. It becomes a backdrop rather than an obstacle, a depth that supports experience rather than interrupting it. Just as the night sky feels calming rather than threatening when one accepts its immensity, so too does cosmic mystery become restful when it is no longer resisted. The universe does not close itself off. It simply reveals that openness does not require comprehension. Existence continues smoothly, even where explanation ends. Black holes, once symbols of absolute limits, now appear as anchors of stillness within this awareness. They mark places where the universe itself rests, no longer exchanging information, no longer participating in dialogue with observers. Their silence is not aggressive, it is complete. In acknowledging that silence, the mind learns a parallel lesson, that not all understanding must be verbal, not all insight must be articulated, and not all meaning must be extracted. Some realities are meant to be held without comment. As awareness settles, time itself feels different. Without the pressure of resolution, moments stretch gently, unfolding without direction or expectation. The future is no longer something to arrive at, and the past no longer something to reconstruct. Attention rests in the present, supported by the understanding that whatever lies beyond perception does not threaten what is currently experienced. The unknown remains vast, but it no longer presses inward. It stays where it belongs, surrounding, containing, and stabilizing the moment. In this quiet awareness, the universe feels less like a machine to be decoded and more like an environment to be inhabited. Complexity does not disappear, but it ceases to demand effort. The mind no longer tries to trace every cause or follow every chain of implication. Instead, it allows reality to be layered, partially hidden, and gently unresolved. This acceptance does not dull intelligence. It refines it, shifting emphasis from control to coherence. And so, resting at the edge of mystery becomes not an ending, but a sustained condition. Curiosity remains, but it breathes more slowly now, moving in rhythm with a universe that does not hurry. Awareness stays open without reaching, attentive without grasping. In the presence of what cannot be known, the mind finds its deepest calm, not because mystery has vanished, but because it no longer needs to be disturbed. The universe remains vast and partially unseen, and within that vastness, awareness rests, steady and unbroken. At this stage of the journey, something subtle but irreversible occurs. The mind stops reaching outward for closure. The final questions do not disappear, yet they loosen their grip, no longer demanding to be answered within a lifetime, a theory, or even a civilization. The universe is allowed to remain vast without being reduced, distant without being bridged, incomplete without being repaired. What once felt like an unanswered demand now feels like open space, wide enough to rest inside rather than struggle against. There is a quiet maturity in this release. It does not come from exhaustion, nor from resignation, but from proportion. After traveling through horizons that cannot be crossed, and depths that cannot be mapped, the mind begins to sense the scale at which it truly exists. Questions that once felt urgent now feel patient. They stretch across epochs, no longer tied to immediate resolution. The universe does not rush toward explanation, and neither does awareness. Both settle into a slower rhythm that does not require completion to feel coherent. Letting the universe be vast means accepting that explanation is not the same as presence. One can exist fully within a reality without possessing its blueprint. Stars shine without asking to be understood. Black holes deepen without offering instruction, and galaxies drift without concern for interpretation. Meaning does not emerge from mastery, but from alignment, from existing in harmony with processes that extend far beyond comprehension. The mind does not shrink when it releases control. It expands to fit the scale of what surrounds it. This release also softens the idea of finality itself. There is no final answer waiting beyond the last question, no concluding statement that closes the universe like a solved equation. Instead, there is continuation without summary, motion without destination, depth without disclosure. The universe does not conclude. It persists. In allowing this persistence to stand without explanation, awareness becomes less sharp, less narrow, and more evenly distributed across experience. As the final questions drift into the background, attention returns to the simple fact of being present within something immeasurably larger. Breathing continues. Time passes. Space holds. The universe does not require interpretation to function, and awareness does not require answers to remain awake. This realization brings a distinct calm, not the calm of certainty, but the calm of stability. Nothing essential is missing, even when much remains unknown. There is a profound gentleness in understanding that the universe does not need to be finished in thought. It is already complete in structure, regardless of how little is known. Questions become companions rather than obstacles, drifting alongside awareness without pulling it forward. Curiosity remains, but it no longer leans into the void. It floats, relaxed, content to move slowly within a reality that does not need to explain itself in order to exist. And so, in this soft release, the universe is allowed to be what it has always been: immense, layered, partially hidden, and quietly self-consistent. The final questions remain unanswered, not because they failed, but because they no longer need to resolve. Awareness rests within scale rather than against it. The cosmos stays open, unfinished and vast, and the mind, no longer demanding closure, drifts comfortably within that openness, steady and unhurried. As the final movement unfolds, there is no announcement, no signal that this is the end. Instead, everything simply begins to slow together. The universe does not stop, it eases. Awareness does not shut down, it loosens its grip. Thoughts stretch wider, softer, less distinct, like clouds thinning at dusk. The vast structures explored along the way, black holes, horizons, singularities, unseen universes, no longer present themselves as concepts to be held, but as distant presences already settled into place. Nothing new is introduced here, because nothing new is required. The journey does not conclude by arriving somewhere, but by resting where it has always been. In this slowing, the distinction between observer and observed begins to fade. The universe is no longer something out there, vast and unreachable, nor is awareness something separate, confined and searching. Both appear to follow the same rhythm now, unhurried and continuous. Time loses its sharp edges. Moments no longer stack neatly one after another, but overlap gently, blending into a single extended presence. The cosmos continues its silent work, and awareness, no longer tracking or measuring, drifts alongside it without resistance. The questions that once guided this journey are still present, but they have lost their urgency. They no longer rise to the surface demanding attention. Instead, they settle deeper, becoming part of the background, like distant stars no longer named but still shining. Curiosity does not vanish. It becomes diffuse, spread evenly across experience rather than focused on resolution. The universe remains immeasurable, incomplete, and partially hidden. Yet this no longer feels like a problem to be solved. It feels like a condition to relax into. Silence begins to take on a different quality here. It is not the absence of sound, but the absence of friction. Nothing pushes forward, nothing pulls back. The universe is not waiting for anything to happen, and awareness is not waiting for anything to end. Black holes deepen somewhere far beyond perception. Stars continue their slow evolution. Galaxies drift along trajectories too vast to follow. All of it proceeds without commentary, without need for recognition, complete in its own motion. As this silence settles, boundaries soften further. The edges of thought blur. Ideas that once felt large and heavy grow lighter, less defined, until they no longer need to be carried at all. Awareness becomes less about holding attention and more about allowing it. The universe does not collapse into darkness, it opens into spacious quiet. There is no final insight, no concluding statement, only the steady continuation of existence, moving at a pace slow enough to feel almost still. In this state, meaning no longer needs to be constructed or defended. It is not extracted from understanding or secured through explanation. Meaning simply remains, embedded in the fact of being present within something vast, lawful, and indifferent to narration. The cosmos does not acknowledge awareness, yet awareness remains sustained by the cosmos. Nothing needs to be named. Nothing needs to be resolved. The universe holds, and awareness is held. And so the journey fades, not into darkness, but into quiet continuity. The universe does not end, and neither does awareness. Both slow together, settling into a shared rhythm where nothing demands attention and nothing resists rest. Beyond all horizons, beyond all limits of knowledge, existence continues in silence. Within that silence, awareness drifts, unburdened, unhurried, and complete, resting gently inside a universe that has never required explanation to remain whole.